Welcome to this webinar, Tips for Managing Change Effectively on Your Project. And this is webinar number 3 of 4 in the planning month. So if you're watching this beyond January, we did 4 different sessions in total, all focused on project planning. So if you haven't met me before, I'm Ben. I am a project manager and a project management coach and trainer, and I've worked in the industry for 20 odd years across all sorts of different types of projects, mainly in the digital area, but I've worked for tiny startups through to massive companies like Accenture Interactive and Wunderman Thompson, and all sorts of different industries. And over the years, I've created hundreds and blogs and videos and training and all sorts of things about project management and productivity. And I run the company, the PPM Academy, which provides training for project managers, whether that's in-house within your companies or online programs or one-to-one coaching as well. So that's me. So what I'm going to cover today, simple format, same approach for all of these webinars this week, 10 tips. And in this particular case, how to manage change on your project. And those tips are going to help you manage change, like with your team and your stakeholders. And also tips to help you manage your own mindset and confidence as well, because managing change isn't easy as a project manager. So what this training isn't, it's not an end-to-end process, how to manage change, like a change request process. And it isn't designed so you have to do all of these tips together to manage change effectively. And if you want to go and find out about a change request process, just Google it. There's loads of default stuff out there that's kind of does the job. But it is designed to give you some tactical things to test and make those 1% improvements, which I talk about a lot in my training. It isn't about making big changes. The best way to make change in general, I know that's the topic of today, but just in general improvements as a project manager is to make those incremental changes. What can I improve upon this week? And then what can I improve upon next week? And it is like a broad range of tips to how you manage change and also how you feel about it while you're doing it as well. So why do we need to manage change effectively? Now, this stat is taken from people in the IT industry, and they take about half of their time reworking delivered work. So 80% of the 600 people surveys spend a lot of time reworking on stuff that effectively has been done. And I want to put this stat in here because it makes a really good point that change isn't just about change requests and change of scope and things like that. It's very hard to get to that end product no matter what type of project you're doing. So you need to plan for this type of adjustments and type of change on your projects, as well as doing the conversations and the knowledge sharing, things like that, to prevent a lot of the rework that you may well have when you feel like you've actually done what you said you're going to do. So change isn't a bad thing though, but it's got to be manageable. So tip number 1, very, very simple, accept it. Change will happen. There's always change on projects. So if you fight against it and think that your plan and your approach is sort of done and dusted, then you're going to have a real struggle because you're going to have to battle with those that you work with. It's going to be a struggle for you personally to manage as well. So when change happens, no matter whether you agree with it or not, you have to accept that has happened. What you do next, obviously that can go in all sorts of different directions, but accept it first and then it'll help you make better decisions going forward. Because we all know change is going to happen as a project manager. And don't be one of those safe project managers, one that is rigid and fight changes, because no one wins. It doesn't look good for you. You're not good. It's not good to work with people like that either. And a safe project manager for me is the one who's just very, very reliant on the processes, thinks the plan is done. But ultimately, we all know that's not going to happen. So prepare yourself for change. And when that happens, the first thing you need to do is accept it. So that's tip number 1. Accept it. No matter how you feel about it, you have to accept it because then you can think more clearly about the best things to do next. Don't fight it, and then you will feel better and you'll manage it more effectively because you've removed some of that emotion away from it. You've moved on to, well, what do I need to do next? Whatever those steps might be. Okay, that was number 1. Tip number 2 is something I talk about in a lot of my training. It's a 3-step process for dealing with issues, typically when someone comes to you with a problem, but you can also use this technique for managing change. Because the first thing you should do when someone comes to you with a change, and this is especially relevant for if you disagree with the change, is don't object. Because if you object straight away, then that will just put the back up of the person who's requesting it. They might feel offended, they might feel annoyed, they might feel angry. It's like immediately getting some barriers in front of them. And they may be completely unaware that this change might be a problem. So the first thing is don't object. Second is show understanding. And by that, I mean, however they're describing the need for this change, it could be the problems or reasons why they want to change, whatever it is, replay that back to them. Use their words, use sort of the keywords that they're using, show understanding, especially when could be quite a disruptive change. Don't, again, argue, don't object, because this just makes it so much easier for you to then take more control, which is the third step. What's next? Because if you've done those first two, you're much more likely to be able to then talk about what you should do next in terms of options. But if you haven't done those first two, then effectively they're just going to be pushing you just to make that change, and that's all they want to hear. But doing these first two gives you some options then to come up with hopefully something that's going to be more workable for you, especially when it's a change that could be quite disruptive. So that's tip number 2, don't object. Tip number 3 is simplify the ask. Now, ask yourself what is actually needed for this change, because it's very easy to be a yes project manager. And if you're a yes project manager, you might seem like you're good to work with, but you're not actually doing yourself any favors, potentially the project, the team that you work with, because easy thing to do is just to say yes. So you need to say, well, what is actually needed? And the problem is, if you do just say yes to that change, it can be really time consuming to answer it in full versus asking good questions about what that change actually is and what's really needed for it. So don't be a yes person. You can still say yes ultimately, but don't let that be the default. So it's a few checks you can do. Find out the root cause for the change. Ask what is the minimum needed for this change. And is there one thing that we could do now what you could do now that would answer the ask? So by doing this, sometimes the request for the change hasn't had the due diligence done on the requester's side. It might be a bit of a on a whim request. So you want to find out why that change has happened. And sometimes that change that's been requested, you might actually say, we don't need to do that. We're actually doing X, Y, and Z in a few weeks, and that will answer that. Who knows? But if you don't ask the good questions, you might not be able to get to that detail. And also asking what's the minimum needed. It's not because you want the easy route. It's just going, well, what's really important? That's what you're trying to find out right now. And again, that one thing relates to that as well. So tip number 3 is simplify the ask. Tip number 4 is use your team. Don't assume you have to do the change requested and just to form the team. Because when that happens, you're missing out on the chance of using your team. You want to be able to gather their feedback and their ideas, and they may have a solution without even having to make a change. And they may have advice that you can share so you don't even have to do the change. So a few things on here. If you just jump straight into accepting a change, so that point I made before about just saying yes, then you're missing that chance to be able to get some really good insights and help from the team. Like, you might be a really experienced project manager, but you have a team for a reason, so use them. Talking with your team, I've done this before where I've gone to the team with a change that actually I feel is a bit of a problem for us to do this. One of those changes you just don't really want to do or you might not agree with. And they have come back to me and said, well, actually, if we did these things, these 3 things, for example, then that's enough. They don't have to do this change. We're already covering that ask somewhere else. And if I hadn't had that conversation, then I wouldn't be able to do that. Or they've gone, no, we definitely shouldn't do this for this reason. And I've got great insights, and I've gone back to the requester and said, right, this is what the team have said. And okay, fair enough. No, I agree, we shouldn't do it. And we've moved on. So use your team. You never know what help and insights they may be able to give you. And in some cases, prevent that change from happening, especially for those ones that you really don't want to be doing. Number 5 is show action. So never sit on a potential change, because putting it off or worrying about it or even moaning about it, it just won't help. It's a bit like if you've discovered an issue, if you go, oh, I don't want to deal with that today, I'll look at that tomorrow. You're already losing time to deal with that issue, losing the opportunities for somebody to come and help you and fix it. And it's similar with a change. Well, with a change, you feel like it's quite disruptive. It might be a lot of work to do. You're just losing time about it. So you want to show action. And by taking action as a project manager, it increases the confidence you have in your own abilities. You're doing something, you're just getting it done versus just letting it sit in your mind for 24 hours or 48 hours. And it increases the confidence that those that you work with have in you. And if you're taking action, because taking action can mean many things, and I'll give you some examples in a minute, it just means you're chased less, because those requesters know that you're doing something. And no one wants to be chased. What's happening with this? When am I going to get an update? What are you doing about it? Whatever the request is, no one likes to be chased, and it doesn't instill confidence in you. And you don't feel great about it either when you get chased for something. So taking action, a few examples, can mean just being really clear in the actions that you ask. So again, not just saying yes, you're asking good questions, trying to understand where this change is coming from. That's one form of taking action when it comes to change management. It could also mean just being really clear on what you need to do next, that should say. And by that, I mean, again, don't just say yes. It could be, okay, I've listened to you, not objective, etc., etc. I need to go and speak to this person, and I'm going to have this type of meeting, or I want to look at this, whatever it is, but just show and be really, really clear about what you're going to do next. And taking action also means just keeping the promises you make. So don't overpromise. Don't be too quick to jump in and say, yeah, I'll do this. I'll get all the team together this afternoon. I'm going to go do it right now. You don't know that you can get all the team together. So be really careful with the promises you make. But so then when you make those promises, you can actually keep them, because then that instills confidence in you from those you're working with again, and instills your confidence or improves your confidence in how you work as well. So number 6 is understand why this change is happening. And you already notice there's a bit of an overlap between these tips, but that's because there isn't a perfect way of doing things. So there's sometimes some hidden reasons for change. Like your stakeholder's boss has just walked past them in passing, asking for a change to something. They might have just seen something they really like. That could be it. You don't know. Or they might have just seen something a competitor was doing, but they haven't actually checked that it aligns with the project's purpose, or maybe even the company they work for, their strategy, or the project goals, whatever it is. Or it could just be a personal opinion. So it's just not backed up by data, which I'd be really careful about. Like everybody's got their own opinion on things. Good, you want to hear those, but be very careful if there's a decision being made based on one person's opinion. Or they might be lacking the confidence in their role. And I've seen and experienced this, didn't realize it at the time, that certain clients are making requests for change just so it looks like they're doing something, looks like they know what they're doing, but in reality, they're just making noise and making your life a lot harder. So never assume that the change comes with good reasons to do it. And wherever you can, find out where this change is coming from. And if you don't, again, that goes back to that yes point. You're just saying yes to things. And you're not doing yourself any favors. I'm not saying this happens every single time for every single change, but you need to have it in your mind that this potentially could be happening and keep an eye out for it. But then you're not helping your project, you're not helping your team. Your team will get frustrated with change that doesn't really make sense for the project. And you're not helping, if you're working with a client or a stakeholder, you're not helping them either in the long run. So number 7 is look after the team. So this is a prompt or reminder about monitoring how the team are dealing with change on your project. Because as you've seen, and I talk a lot about managing your own mindset as a project manager, it's difficult being a project manager at times. It can be overwhelming. There's a lot going on, but you need to look out for the signs with your team as well to see how well they are doing themselves in all aspects of a project, but in this example, specifically around change. Because everybody manages or deals with change differently. So keep an eye out for those warning signs when it's not going so well. And are there signs of frustration, acceptance, lower engagement, blame, that type of thing? And when you see that, make sure you deal with them, because it can impact your team, your projects, and you negatively. And by dealing with them, that might just be having a conversation with someone. I'm going, oh, I noticed you're a bit frustrated in the team meeting this morning. Is that something we can have a conversation about? And if you don't, the quality of your work can lower as a team. You'll have more problems. The work can take longer. And then lots of these, they may not seem like really big things, or they may not be big thing that everybody notices, but they have that compounding effect where a bit of problem on the quality, a few more problems, things take a bit longer, then that obviously impacts your plan and your project in the long run for all sorts of negative reasons. So speak with who needs it, clarify, show understanding, show empathy, but just don't ignore it. And actually, one final thing on that one is be wary of not treating change like how you would change, because as I said, everybody thinks differently and reacts differently to change. Some are like, fine, yeah, well, let's just get on with it. Others really struggle with it. So don't go in there with how your own beliefs about change, because it's not about you. It's about your team when it comes to this tip. So number 8 is share the facts. The project manager isn't there to please the client. I've mentioned this a few times before on LinkedIn posts and other training, and sometimes some people are like, oh, what do you mean? Hang on a minute. Of course the project manager is there to please the client. And yes, I agree with that. They are there to please the client, but this one needs a little bit of context. So you are there to run the project, focusing on the objectives, the deliverables, managing the plan, helping the team essentially create the best possible outcome for the project. You're not there to keep the client happy. You're there to deliver against those project deliverables and those outcomes. And as I said, motivate the team, facilitate the project, all that stuff. As a project manager, I've never had it in my job description, make sure the client is happy. That is your job. So when you're presented with a change that you are responsible for, you want to share what you agreed originally. So the baselines. What could this mean for the project? So the impact. And gather as much information as you can, like I've been talking about already, about what that change is and why you have it. And you do that because not every change has thought behind it or awareness of what was planned or the impact. So this can then result in change not being needed or not deemed worth it when it was reviewed against the actual impact. And the reason why you should share the facts as a project manager is don't assume everybody else knows them. A lot of the time you describe the statement of work, the contract, the deliverables and things like that in a statement of work, which could have been weeks ago or even months ago. People just forget. Sometimes when they ask for a change, it's not because they're trying to be difficult or ignoring actually what's in scope, but they just don't know. They just hasn't crossed their mind. So don't go in there with the assumption that they know as much as you. And often when you present the facts, that change is pushed away. It's like, we don't need this, because they didn't realize actually what you agreed to do in the first place. And also looking at the purpose of the project again and going, actually, no, it doesn't make sense. You're right. Let's not do this. Let's park this for now. So that's share the facts, number 8. Number 9 is quick analysis. So don't always, I'm not saying like for lots of these tips, doesn't apply for every single change, but for some, jump into the detailed planning when you have a request for a change, because you may be wasting your time if that change then gets rejected. And then this can have a big impact like on your time to facilitate all the discussions and the planning about that change and your team's time as well. So check for the impact on costs, but not all the detail is needed. I think this is probably about cost about £5 worth of team's time, for example. Check for the impact on timings. I think this will probably add about a week on to make this change. Gather some questions to ask, but not all. Now, what are the key things? Just had this change come in. Anyone got any quick questions? Put it out to the team. Just get it on Teams or what's at their desks. Just something nice and quick and easy. Because then you have enough of a picture of what this change means, you can discuss with the requester. And the result? It might not be needed. Now they have a better idea of the impact. Or they may have not actually needed it in the first place. And if it is needed, you've already gathered more information on the ask through this analysis. And it's just to prevent you going too deep on the change. Going back to that point around sometimes the change hasn't had that much thought behind it before it's come to you. And by doing that quick analysis, you've got just enough information without disrupting the whole team and everything, all your plans and things like that, to go back. And if, as I said on that last point, if it is still needed, fine. You've done a lot of the work already and you can form more of the information and the data that you need to make it final. But just sometimes a quick analysis is enough. Right, the final tip, number 10, is proactive change. So does this mean you are looking for changes as a project manager? Yes, it does. And you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Why do we want to implement more change? Now, I briefly mentioned earlier on that change isn't a negative thing. It often is deemed that way, but change can be really positive as well. Change can be changing your original approach for how you're going to do things, adapting some scope to get a better outcome for the project. Change can have so many positive things if it's managed well. And proactive change gives you great control of the project and its outcomes. Plus, it elevates you as a project manager in your team and your company as well, because you are taking a more leadership position when it comes to improving how you work. So what it is, you want to look for improvements to what you committed to doing. So if you have a statement of work or contract, yes, you want to share the facts like I was saying before, but there may be things in there just because you documented it and agreed it 3 months ago, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right on this month, 4 months later. So look at what things you can do to improve. And these could result in more value added, time saved or more positive project outcome. And they allow you to implement positive change. Now you know what's actually needed. And it puts you in control of change rather than reacting to it. And it doesn't mean you're now doing more work than planned, because if you're being proactive about it, you're saying, well, actually, we shouldn't be doing this. So you're often taking things out, but we should be doing this. And it's done in a very transparent way. And ultimately, that will put you in a good position as a project manager because you're looking further ahead. You're being much more proactive in your planning, but you're also being much more proactive in terms of I'm not just thinking about just delivering what we said we're going to deliver. I want to get the best possible outcome for this project. And proactive change is one way of doing that. Right, so to summarize, accepting change will happen. It's going to happen on your project. Whether you agree with some of the changes coming your way or not, it will happen. Just be ready to flip that mindset. This has happened. What's the best thing to do next? Don't object. No matter what the change is, and you will get some in your career where you're like, why are you asking for this right now? Don't object straight away, because it just makes it far harder to get to a solution or an approach that's more agreeable. Might not be agreeable, but it might be more agreeable than it was when it first came into your inbox. Simplify the ask as much as possible. Ask good questions. You don't always have to just say yes. If you say yes straight away, then you're setting yourself up to potentially failure or more work as well. Use your team. You never know what ideas they may come up with, and that might prevent the change completely, or actually you can still do the change without having to do like a change request or change of scope or anything like that. So don't jump too quickly as a PM to telling the team what to do. Show action. Like I said, there's different ways of doing that, but by showing action, it builds confidence in you and you're less likely to be chased and you stay more in control of what's happening. So less pressure. Understand why this change is happening. Where's this come from? Are there some really good reasons for this change? Or was it on a whim? Was it they've just seen an advertisement and go, oh, I like that, let's do that, or an app or whatever it might be. Look after the team. So don't make the assumption that if you are one of those PMs who actually manages change quite well, doesn't bother you too much, you just manage the process, great, but not everybody is like that. So look for those signs where team members are struggling and help them out. Number 8 is share the facts, because not everybody knows the facts. It's not that you are trying to be difficult, but it's your job as a PM to track and run the project and deliver it against what you said you're going to deliver it against, or to, whatever it might be. So share those facts. Don't be afraid to do that. Number 9 is quick analysis. So just remember that sometimes you shouldn't go down the deep route of documenting and understanding everything this change means for your project in your team. Sometimes some quick analysis is enough to get it to the next stage. And sometimes it might be, well, actually, now I know that, we probably should go down this route, or let's not do it at all. It just can save you and the team a lot of time. And then the final one was proactive change. Just making sure you are looking further ahead. Does it still make sense to do these things? Is there something we can do better, even if that does mean changing the scope? But you're in more control, and it puts you in a more leadership position because you are looking at what's best for this project, this client, and this team. Right, that's it. That was number 3, managing change, and the final session in January is tomorrow, which is wrapping up your project. So again, same format, 10 tips. And I'll be spinning the wheel to see who's won a free coaching session with me, and I'll announce it on LinkedIn tomorrow as usual. And the Planning Bootcamp, a reminder, it's going live tomorrow. So you can sign up from then onwards. It's a 6-week training program. So if you like these tips, then this touches on a lot of the things that we're going through across those 6 weeks. There's 30 plus on-demand lessons that you can watch in your own time, and they get released like drip fed over those 6 weeks, I should say. Weekly Q&As to learn with your fellow cohort takers. Nothing beats sharing your experiences with other PMs, because I always have some advice and some tips, but other PMs will have advice and tips from their own experiences too. There's a learn with me approach, as I call it, where as part of the bootcamp, you get 2 one-to-ones with me, which are booked in for an hour, but sometimes they go longer, depends on how long you need. And that could be talk about planning, could be talk about absolutely anything that you want. Career development is completely up to you. Maximum of 20 spaces available. That's so I can support those one-to-ones and those weekly Q&As as well. And across those 6 weeks, you get prioritized access to me in the community. That's where the whole course is hosted, including the Q&As as well. So during those 6 weeks, because you may have some emergencies or just questions and things that come up that you might not want to ask, whether it's in the one-to-one or in the weekly Q&As, you can just message me directly and I will help you out. So if you want more information, and if you want to book a call with me, you can obviously contact me in the community or on LinkedIn, but you can book a free call with me, no obligation to then go and sign up or anything like that, just to ask me any questions you like about the training. You can do that by scanning that QR code there on the left. And then the middle one takes you to the Planning Bootcamp website, where you can learn more about what's included and also obviously purchase the course as well. And the far right one, if you are watching this and you're not part of the PPM Academy community already, it's completely free to join. It's for project managers only. Scan that and that'll take you to the joining landing page, and then you have to answer a few questions about your experience, things like that. And then within 24 hours, typically you get added. So keep an eye out for the invite. Check your junk mail as well if you haven't got it within 24 hours. And if you still haven't, then feel free just to reach out to me and contact me. All right. That's it. Hope you found that useful. 10 tips for managing change effectively, and good luck on your projects and managing change. Take care. Bye-bye.